Okay, well, I guess we'll go ahead and get this started. Good evening. I'm Trapper Fowler. I'm your Habitat Connectivity Director here at Wild Virginia. Tonight, we're lucky to have Trinity Mills with us, talking about Loudoun and some vernal pools at the J.K. Black Oak Wildlife Sanctuary. Trinity's with the Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. This is an 89-acre wetland preserve, and Trinity actually invited me up to come check this place out not too long ago, and it's amazing. So I'm glad I'm getting to hear more detail about it through the webinar tonight, as well as you all. Um, Thanks again for joining us. Just want to let everybody know as a reminder, this is being recorded, only so that we can share it back out and you can share it around with friends and colleagues. Um, Again, if you're just joining, feel free to introduce yourself, put your name and where you're joining from in the chat. For questions, we'll hold all those till the end. And if you would, just enter those in the Q&A box versus the chat. And we'll try to field as many as those as we can with time that's left towards the end of the webinar. Don't be shy entering those. We can all learn from your questions. And again, this recording will be made available to you with a follow-up email. So please do share it around. So, in addition to our habitat connectivity program that I manage, we also have the water quality program, in which Mr. David Sly leads. So please be sure to tune in to some of those program events and advocacy engagement opportunities that are upcoming. Also want to thank Kylie with Wild Virginia, who's making sure everything runs smooth in the background. Please note that Wild Virginia can't do this important work without your help. We get our energy from you all, the energy to keep pushing for better wildlife habitat connectivity and water quality protections. Please consider supporting Wild Virginia. We appreciate your support, whether that's through donations or just helping to advocate. Everybody can help in their own way, and we sure do appreciate it. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker this evening, Trinity Mills. She's the Conservation Advocacy Coordinator at Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. She's a native of Virginia and a graduate of Christopher Newport University. Before joining Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy, she served as a fellow with the Piedmont Environmental Council, so PEC, and worked on behalf of the Humane Society of the United States as a wildlife and animal welfare grassroots canvassing director. She has just completed her master's in conservation science and policy from George Mason, researching the history and implications of public access to private conservation lands. Outside of wildlife and conservation, she enjoys traveling, hiking, and film photography. All right. So here's just some general contact information for us over at Wild Virginia, should you need it. And while we switch over to our speaker screen, Trinity, I will stop sharing now and I will let you start sharing. Take it away when you're
All
ready.
right. Thank you so much, Trapper. All right, give me a moment, folks, as I get my presentation queued up here. I'm really happy to be with you all tonight and excited to share a little bit about what we're doing over at Loudon Wildlife and at JK Black Oak. I also wanted to give a shout out. I saw somebody from in the chat is tuning in from Moseley, Virginia, which is my hometown, and I don't hear that too often. So great to see some representation from all over the state. All right, let's see if you guys can see my presentation. All right, everybody's seeing a title screen.
Good to go, Trinity. Looks good.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming and thank you all for being interested in hearing a little bit about what we're doing over at JK Black Oak with Loudon Wildlife. So just a real quick little note about Loudon Wildlife Conservancy. We are a volunteer-driven, membership-based nonprofit We focus on a plethora of different programs across the county of Loudoun, all working towards the protection of wildlife habitat. So we do citizen science programs, we have stream monitoring, bird counts, butterfly counts, that sort of thing. We also do quite a bit of advocacy. That's my job over there. And we also have education. We do a Peterson Young Naturalist program in collaboration with Loudoun County Public Schools, focused on getting young folks out in nature, and quite a lot of other programs that we're really thrilled about, including J.K. Black Oak Wildlife Sanctuary, which is a 89-acre preserve that we own and operate in Loudoun County. It's right outside the village of Lucketts. It has been designated as a globally rare wetland by the Department of Conservation and Recreation with Virginia. And it is host to quite a few of the programs that we are most proud of at Loudoun Wildlife, including field trips. Like I said, we have that collaboration with Loudoun County Public Schools through our Peterson Young Naturalist program, and we've just started hosting field trips for elementary and high school classes over at Black Oak. We also do quite a bit of habitat restoration projects and community science initiatives, including cleanups and tree plantings. We do stream monitoring, bat monitoring, insect counts, and of course, our amphibian monitoring. And that is because Loudoun Wildlife, J.K. Black Oak, is home to a wide array of vernal pools. That is what we are most proud of over at Black Oak, and is what makes that habitat so unique, is the presence of these unique ecological features. So what is a vernal pool? A vernal pool, also known as a ephemeral pool, they are filled with rainwater, surface runoff, snowmelt, or groundwater, and they have a dynamic nature, meaning that they are not constantly filled. So they have wet seasons and dry seasons. They typically start to fill up by early winter from snowmelt, etc. And then they will retain water until early to midsummer. With the drought we've been seeing up in Loudoun, we've been seeing the last few years those pools going dry much earlier than usual. But the standard for vernal pools is that they will usually stay wet through midsummer. They're unique because they're not fed by an inlet or an outlet water source. Like said, they are usually fed by groundwater and surface water runoff. But this means that they are especially a prime habitat for our amphibian species. They are devoid of fish, and they're often found in wooded forest areas. And they are prime habitat for breeding for amphibians. So this is just a photo of what a vernal pool looks like when it's wet. And then this is a photo of the same vernal pool in a dry area. This is kind of in the between of the drying process before it's completely dried out. And then here's a side-by-side comparison of the same area. So they definitely are extremely dynamic, and they change over time. And they're a host to quite a few unique and special species. And they are only allowed to exist because of a unique type of topography that is prevalent in the area that we know of as karst. So this is a type of landscape that has dissolving bedrock and distinct ecological features, including sinkholes, depressions, caves, that sort of thing. These features often indicate where a vernal pool might crop up. So you can see in this map right here, these little diamonds denote sinkholes, and then these circles are where some of the vernal pools on Black Oak are, and you can see how they are pretty aligned in a lot of cases with the proximity to those depressions from that karst topography. This is a type of photography that's associated with soluble rock types, limestone, marble, gypsum, that kind of thing. In Loudoun County, there is a carbonate karst area along the Route 15 corridor that is north of Leesburg. In our area specifically, that karst is limestone. And those sinkholes are extremely prevalent to the west side of Route 15, as we'll see a little bit more later on. Vernal pools are critical breeding habitat for many amphibian species, including those that are rare, threatened, and endangered. We have, thankfully, quite a few species at Black Oak that I'll touch on later that we're pretty proud to host, fitting into some of these categories. They really provide for a unique type of community for our invertebrates as well, because of how they host for the unique larval stages that some invertebrates require. And then, of course, supplying food for the other woodland creatures around the pools is pretty critical. So some of the species that I wanted to touch on that are prevalent in our vernal pools at Black Oak. The indicator species are the most critical. These also known as obligate species. These are organisms whose presence, absence, or abundance reflects a specific environmental condition. In this case, the feature of a vernal pool. And that feature's presence can signal a change in changing biological conditions of a particular ecosystem. It might indicate when a vernal pool is on the out if you see these species start to decline. So this is some of the indicator species that we see in Loudoun, specifically at Black Oak, for vernal pool activity. And I'm going to go really briefly through these to get you guys acquainted. So our salamanders, this is where my heart lies, not to play favorites, but we have our Jefferson salamanders, our spotted salamanders, and our marbled salamanders. With these, the species that I was talking about earlier that we're pretty proud of, the Jefferson salamander is a Tier 4 species with the Virginia Wildlife Action Plan. It's of moderate conservation need, and they are pretty prevalent at Black Oak. They're one of the salamanders that we find more than some of the others that I list here, which is really, really special. The spotted and the marbled salamanders, spotted are my favorite personally. And the marbled and the spotted kind of go hand in hand. We see them oftentimes together. But for the spotted and the marbles, we haven't seen them in quite a while at Black Oak, but we know that they are around. They are some of the ones that we had found first when we were getting involved with the property. We also have our frog species. So we have a wood frog and an eastern spadefoot. Our Frog Watch program at Black Oak is alive and thriving, and our resident herpetologist, Jenny Erickson, who was kind enough to provide all the photos that you're seeing tonight, is very enthusiastic about our frogs over there. The Eastern Spadefoot is her passion project. We have quite a lot of them over at Black Oak, and it was really special to find them because they had not been found in Loudoun County previously. There are a really fun species. Oftentimes they are go by a little bit of a misnomer. They're usually called the Eastern Spadefoot toad, but they are not a toad. They are a frog, and they breed in our vernal pools in abundance. And then, of course, we have the wood frog as well. The next species I wanted to touch on is one that is really special because it is exclusive to vernal pools. That is the fairy shrimp. The fairy shrimp are a freshwater crustacean. They are really small. They average a half an inch to 2 lengths at most. As adults, they have a pretty short lifespan. They're filter feeders, so they are always going to be seen upside down. As you can see here, this is a top-down view of one on the right over here. They lay eggs, which dry as the vernal pool dries, and then they stay dormant throughout the dry season. And then when the vernal pool refills, they hatch. And that's a really, really cool thing. They are a great food source for our salamander larvae that we're seeing above, as well as our abundance of bird species that we have on Black Oak. This is a really unique species that I know that folks really like to see when they come and view the pools at Black Oak. So it's a couple of the other species to mention are faculty species at Black Oak. So these are species that have physical or behavioral adaptations that do allow them to utilize the pools, but they can also survive in permanent wetland habitats that are not ephemeral. So that is the spring peeper, the Eastern American toad, the pickerel frog, and the gray tree frog, which is what you see right here. And we love these just as much as we do our indicator species for vernal pools, but we have quite a few more on that end. We have quite a lot of spring peepers that as well too. So a little bit about some of the habitat conditions for vernal pools. Amphibians only use them for a brief time because they only exist for a brief time. A key reason for the uniqueness of vernal pools is because they are a feature that's integrated into a larger, usually forested wetland ecotype. They're only prevalent for those brief periods, which is why they are so critical to the development of some of those species that rely on them. This kind of integration with the larger forest and other wetland habitats means that the connection to that larger habitat is all the more important. And a vernal pool that does not have an appropriate surrounding upland habitat buffer will lose its key species that sustain it. The buffer that is requested is about 450 feet. And unfortunately, that is a recommendation, not a requirement. So moving on just a little bit to talk about some of the threats to vernal pools. We know in abundance, I'm sure that you all are kept up to date on the needs and conservation these days and know that development is the biggest threat to habitat here in most places in Virginia. And also for biodiversity as a whole, the destruction, fragmentation, and degradation of habitat are the things that most negatively impact the survivorship of wildlife. And in Virginia, we know that the conversion of natural land to residential and commercial development is the primary mechanism why bitch habitat is lost. And we know that that also comes in connection to the infrastructure that is required to sustain this increased development, which is something that we are very familiar with in Loudoun County when it comes to infrastructure such as roads and power lines. This map that you're seeing right here is a DCR natural heritage map of ecological cores. So those areas in dark red and orange are the ones that have the highest scores of that core habitat, and the green and yellow represent moderate scores for connectivity. And you can see right over here, this is Route 15. So our area over in Lucketts, right about here. So we're not quite in one of those key habitat areas, but we are very close by. So, as said, as increased development continues to put pressure on our habitat in Loudoun County, so too does the infrastructure that is demanded to sustain that development. And in a lot of places that you are all probably familiar with, that can look like power lines, pretty prevalent in Eastern Loudoun and in Western Loudoun. We're seeing an increase and impacts from the road network. So just a little comparison of these two maps. You can see obviously where those core habitats are in Loudoun County versus where some of these road maps are indicating a high concentration of roads. There are also roads are cited as the primary cause of population decline in many species. And we'll touch a little bit more on why that is especially the case when it comes to our amphibians. I wanted to open up a really quick extra map for you guys to show the impact of this road network on the karst topography that sustains our vernal pools. If you'll give me a moment to switch my screen. All right, so you guys should be seeing a map right now with this red area. So this is the karst area around the Route 15 corridor north of Leesburg. So you can see Route 15 going along here. All of these little black dots on that west side of Route 15 are sinkholes. And so you can see the extreme prevalence of this kind of habitat and how these kind of are permeating around the road and the impacts that they are potentially having on the road itself. All right. So, what road projects mean for wildlife habitat? As said, it's these kind of three pillars of impact when it comes to how wildlife are being impacted by habitat loss. So, the degradation of the impacts of the roads do impact the surrounding habitat, uh, specifically from things like heightened exhaust fumes, pollution, increased mortality from collisions, impact of noise, lights from cars, all things that contribute to making the habitat that remains after a project less amenable to wildlife success. And then, of course, fragmentation. So this is the splitting of habitat that creates unnatural lines and causes barrier effects in habitat and decreases that core ecological cores that we see when habitat is allowed to be sustained. Barrier things are largely from roads, sometimes fences that prevent dispersal, limit gene flow, and might limit the ability for our wildlife species to emigrate from a certain habitat area. And then, of course, the actual physical footprint of the project itself. And then, in its addition to that, the impacts of the construction project obviously have a pretty significant impact. Noise, debris, human disturbance can all make habitat less amenable and less fruitful for the wildlife. So amphibians are unfortunately one of the groups of species that are the most vulnerable to the impacts of roadways. Due to their ectothermic status, amphibians and reptiles often seek out asphalt because of its ability to retain heat. So they will often sit on roads. They travel really long distances and they don't typically try to avoid the roads. So they are already there and prevalent, and they're almost completely imperceptible to most motorists, especially our smaller amphibians like our salamanders here. Because they're smaller, they're low to the ground, they're active in the dark, and especially during really rainy weather, all conditions that mean they are almost invisible to drivers oftentimes. And that increased susceptibility leads to a disproportionate impact for entire populations of amphibian species. So, why this is relevant to us now? There is a project going on in Loudoun County right now to improve the Route 15 corridor. So, this is a project that has been ongoing for quite a while, and I know some folks I saw tuning in from around the Loudoun and Lucketts area are very familiar with the need for this project and the contention that has surrounded it since the time that it became a project that the county took on. Route 15 is an extremely problematic corridor. The traffic is absolutely unheard of. And there is a lot of safety concerns about the state of the roadway and the manner that motorists behave. There is also along the Route 15 corridor, it's not pictured on this map, it's a little bit too far south. But right around over here, if you can see where my mouse is moving, way down here to the south, just a little bit north of Leesburg, lies one of the 10 priority areas for wildlife crossings, according to the Wildlife Eco Collision hotspot data that was collected not that long ago. So this corridor is definitely something that is been on the county's mind for quite a while. And is definitely in need of improvement. And that need for improvement takes form in a widening project all the way from Leesburg up to Point of Rocks, which is at that Maryland border. This widening means that when they get to a obstacle, in this case, the village of Lucketts, they have to figure out a way to go around it. And the positioning of JK Black Oak has put it in a particularly precarious position to get this project to continue because of where the preserve is located. So a little bit of background further on this project. In 2022, the board decided that they were going to only look at Western study areas. So when they say Western study areas, this map is unfortunately not oriented where north is up, north is over this way to the right. They decided to look at a study area that was just to the west of the existing Route 15, about where they could put this bypass that goes around the village of Lucketts. That, of course, means that it is right in prime position to impact JK Black Oak. And we are doing everything in our power to stay informed and communicate to protect this sanctuary. Back in 2022, when that initial area was designed, there was a lot of deliberation on the county side as they secured contractors. It was, like I said, a project that has been a long time coming and has a lot of moving pieces and has been moving much slower than I think a lot of the community would prefer that it be to get those issues corrected. So from that initial decision up until last June, we waited and we saw last June the initial alignments for the bypass project released. So that was what you're seeing here on the screen. There were a couple or four different alternatives that were originally produced. And all of them, as you could see, would have had a pretty significant impact on JK Black Oak. A little bit of context for those of you that might not be familiar with the village of Lucketts, these two routes right here are pretty inviolable. They go through a community, a neighborhood right here of trailers that is pretty critical to the town of Lucketts. And we also see these two larger options that go along the west side, along the existing New Valley Church Road. And these were especially concerning to us for a number of reasons, largely because these would have essentially resulted in a significant degree of biological isolation for JK Black Oak. The existing Route 15 is to remain, and so is bracketed on the eastern side by the village of Lucketts. And are these options for the bypass to proceed? It would be a large scale roadway. Typically was considered to be at least 4 lanes of high speed 55 to 60 mile per hour traffic with a significant right of way that would have precluded the natural crossings of our wildlife into Black Oak. This is especially important because, as you cannot really see from the map that I have in front of me, right up here is the Catoctin Ridgeline, which we know is a migratory path between the habitat at Black Oak and to the ridgeline. So these two routes over here would have severely impacted the viability of that migratory path and could have a pretty significant impact on the genetic diversity and viability of Black Oak itself. Now, after those initial routes were released to the public, they deliberated and it took public input, and the bottom two options were taken off of the table. So they were essentially just considering the blue and the orange routes. That was about fall of last year. And that's when things started to shift a little bit. So in the interim, between the release and the preference given to those beginning routes, and now we have seen quite a change in how this project is being handled. And the threats to the vernal pools at Black Oak are still pretty abundant. There were previous studies done on this roadway and ways to fix this problem that included some smaller scale fixes that are now under consideration, but we still don't know yet where the impacts of these smaller scale fixes could be felt. As we are hopeful that it is not going to be that full 4 lane, large 55-mile-per-hour bypass that would have isolated the sanctuary. That option still is essentially on the table. But there's also smaller scale options being considered that would incorporate roundabouts and slower speeds that would have less of an impact depending on where they are placed. So this map right here is showing the sinkhole. So that's where those little black and red triangles are. And then you can see some of the vernal pools highlighted around them. This yellow area right here is the amphibian migratory range from that wetland area and from those vernal pools. This is just about the distance that you'll find some of our more trackable amphibians to spread away from the vernal pool breeding ground and then come back to. So just a general idea. And you can see that this right here represents that New Valley Church Road, where that full-scale bypass would be, is well within the migratory range. And then these two over here represent some of the potential pathways for a smaller scale option, which would, of course, still have an impact, but decidedly less so than the larger scale bypass, which could have actually caused some of the vernal pools that are right on the corner of the property to be completely decimated. Now, where the county is now, I found out just this morning that the county has put out a public engagement strategy for how they are going to be communicating with the public on the smart scale applications that they have put in with the state. So, like said, we still don't know exactly where these projects are going to be placed. Those maps have not yet been released by the county, but we know that they are considering a few different options, and we are still staying engaged to do our best to be educated and find out what those are. And that is just because the difference between a full-scale bypass, which could take out entire vernal pools along the western border of the sanctuary, like I was showing, versus a smaller scale roadway, which may go along the eastern edge of the property, or some combination thereof that completely bisects the preserve. Definitely needs to be emphasized. The difference of strategy based on how the impact could be felt is pretty significant. And regardless of where the potential route will be studied, placement within that 450-foot buffer around a vernal pool would have pretty decided negative impacts. The geotechnical and environmental studies portion of the assessment will not happen until later on. But we have been, like said, staying engaged with the county to do our best to communicate to them the sensitive nature of these areas and protect those vernal pools with that buffer and protect our amphibians from the negative impacts of the roadway. So as we go forward, some of the things that we're emphasizing and doing our best to emphasize alongside protecting our amphibian species is a lot of education. So like I said, I am so grateful to all of you for being here to listen to me this evening to hear about our vernal pools and why they are so important. And what the real danger of this habitat disappearing is, which is the sustenance of these species that rely on this really unique feature that isn't present in a lot of places or a lot of wetlands in general in the state. We're also doing quite a lot of advocacy. We're working to communicate with both the county and the public to do everything possible to protect the unique and rare vernal pool habitat that we host here in Loudoun. And in the event that it is impossible to avoid proximity of the roadway, there's a real challenge that lies in how we would proceed in that regard. And that is because vernal pools are not fed by that external water source. As said previously, they are fed by surface water runoff, groundwater, and snowmelt primarily, which means that they don't have a stream that you can easily put a culvert in to protect these species from crossing a roadway. Um, One of the three potential routes, which would be along the eastern side of the option that we are gathering the county is considering, would have a stream, but the others we have no idea where along the property line, if it were to impact it, there would be an opportunity for a crossing. That being said, I have a short little graphic that I wanted to share with you guys as we do consider the potential of advocating for amphibian-specific wildlife crossings for this major roadway project that could help to protect some of these little guys that don't have the ability to go through a stream culvert. So give me 1 second and I will show you guys a quick little graphic on an innovative solution for an amphibian specific crossing. All right. So, like said, we are hoping that it does not come to this point, and that they are able to find a path for the improvements to this roadway that will not impact Black Oak. But regardless of how it proceeds, we are absolutely ready to go to bat for our rare little species over here that we are holding so close to our hearts at Black Oak. Now, there's more that you all can still do to help when it comes to vernal pools. Um, Obviously, as said, reptiles and amphibians are especially susceptible to the vehicles on roadways. And if you do observe a reptile or amphibian crossing the road and you are able to safely do so, obviously not the case for busy roadways. And like said, a lot of times they are imperceptible. But if you do perceive them, and you are able to move it off the road, make sure you do so in the direction that it was headed. Don't relocate it in a different spot or try to put it back to where it came from. It will just try to cross the road again. But something that you can do is safely try to move reptiles or amphibians off the road if you see them. This photo was taken actually right outside the sanctuary. This is that New Valley Church Road. And one of our vernal pools is right here in the darkness. So you can see some of these frogs that were getting helped by one of our volunteers. Other ways that you can help protect vernal pools through a couple different things. When recreating, limiting ATV access and that sort of thing. One thing that you can see here, this is a vernal pool that is an old tire track A lot of old tire ruts become vernal pools because they rely on those permanent depressions. And so sometimes anthropological impacts can produce those vernal pools. And so limiting things like ATVs and other impacts on unpaved roads where these ruts might be present is pretty good way to minimize your impacts. And then just also being mindful that amphibian activity still occurs when pools are dry. Specifically in the fall, the marbled salamander is one that is especially active around the dry areas of the vernal pool before they fill up. With regards to chemicals, when you are in or near vernal pools, doing your best to avoid using fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides. This does include bug spray. If you know that you will be in and around water, opting for no bug spray or natural bug sprays is one way that you can protect the aquatic species and amphibian species that rely on these vernal pools. Promethium is an aquatic toxic and is a pretty common ingredient for bug spray. So one thing that you can keep in mind is opting for some of those natural alternatives. Volunteering, we have so many community science opportunities at Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. So those of you that are up in Loudoun or are willing to come up and visit, please sign up to volunteer. We would love to have you out to do some frog watching, count our frogs and toads and see if you can find any salamanders or vernal pool species in the process. And then advocate. As said, there are some pretty significant threats that are facing our vernal pools in Loudoun County and the habitat at Black Oak Wildlife Sanctuary. We have a pretty robust advocacy program at Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy, so sign up for our newsletters to stay up to date with advocacy alerts about the Route 15 project, so you will be aware when public engagement opportunities arise. To engage with our local board of supervisors and state representatives that are making these decisions that directly impact the lives and viability of our aquatic and amphibian species relying on the vernal pools at Black Oak. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. I think I left about 15 minutes for questions. So I am happy to take some. And thanks so much again for listening and tune in to the rest that we're doing at Loudoun Wildlife. If you have any questions, I will go ahead and drop some of my info in the follow-up for you guys to ask as well. But yeah, happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Trinity. That was an awesome presentation. And please do, provide some links on how folks can help volunteer, and then certainly keep us in the loop how we can help support and advocate for this special place and these vernal pools. There are some questions I can start fielding your way. One is from Lisa. Excuse me. Hold on, I lost it. It's from Karen. She said wildlife crossings question mark. I believe Virginia has federal funding to study where they will go. Can amphibians take advantage of them? So can amphibians take advantage of, I guess, some of the studies? I'm guessing that's related to WCAP and or wildlife crossings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is definitely an opportunity for amphibians to use wildlife crossings. However, as I mentioned previously, some of the amphibians that we're hosting, especially those vernal pool indicator species, are unique because they require a special kind of crossing that doesn't rely on the traditional standard of utilizing a stream culvert. However, there is, of course, like you said, funding and opportunities for wildlife crossings in Virginia, and we definitely plan to emphasize that resource as the project progresses. If it comes to the point that a wildlife crossing would be warranted, there is an appetite for them in Loudoun County, so we would be absolutely emphasizing that resource for protecting our amphibians' passageways.
Yeah, and I'll just note that, as far as funding goes, there is federal funding available, and I know Virginia has received some of those awards, as Trinity said. We also now have the Wildlife Corridor Grant Fund, which became active this month, July 1st. So that's a voluntary donation mechanism that we all can participate in. Right now, the option is to donate through DMV, Department of Motor Vehicle Transactions. So you can, if you go to renew your license or get a new license plate, etc., you actually have an option to donate towards the Wildlife Corridor Grant Fund, which will support studies and eventually support, once money is raised, support crossing infrastructure for things like salamanders and other wildlife. So just wanted to note that as well. Um, Another question we have here, it says, I thought road construction projects had to be routed around wetlands, question mark, question mark. Great question.
Yeah. So it's a interesting question because you would think that that would be the case. However, we definitely have seen the when there is perceived to be no other options, a road can still go through a wetland. This is something that is a direction given by the locality's restrictions, and VDOT is typically following the guidelines of the county building restrictions. We know specifically for Loudoun County that there are prohibitions from building on certain sensitive topographies, including karst. However, we are yet to see how that response will be manifesting if there are actual physical sinkholes present or physical pools present with regards to those sinkholes. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think as you said too, Trinity, these are vernal pools, so they're ephemeral wetlands, so not they're not connected to inflow and outflow, which kind of puts them in that box of isolated wetlands, which aren't protected under the waters of the United States, especially not now with the new interpretation. So, yeah, unfortunately, these really important wetlands don't receive protections. So, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Thank you for that
Um,
clarification, Trevor.
yeah, no problem. Another question, Greta. Hey, Greta. She says, I'm curious about the size of vernal pools being discussed. Is there a typical size or at least a minimum size for such a water body to be fully functional as a vernal pool? Thank you for this wonderful information and for your work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. So vernal pools definitely come in all shapes and sizes. They can be, like said, as small as a tire rut, or as large as a small swimming pool. They really come in every shape and size. And while they are usually prevalent in forested areas, they can also exist in open meadows and can definitely vary in size. Like said, the restrictions and qualifications for what is a vernal pool is if it continues to fill with water year after year on a seasonal basis.
Awesome. Thank you, Trinity. Another question we have here, it says, is VARTF, the Virginia Aquatic Resource Trust Fund, still actively involved on the property?
That is a great question. I know that we had some collaboration with them previously. I would want to consult our preserve manager before I definitively give you a yes or no on that. I have not had direct representation with them, but I do believe that we have been in conversation. I just do not know what degree. I can definitely follow up with some more info on that for you.
All right. I think there is a ton. Trinity, I hope you can see the chat. It's blowing up with thank yous and everyone just speaking to how well this presentation was. So I hope you can see that. That's all the questions I see posted at the moment. I can ask a few and give folks a little bit more time, and then maybe we can wrap up. Um, I was just curious, Trinity. I know there's a couple roads already near the sanctuary, including the one I would have come in on. I can't recall the name when I came for the visit. Do y'all see much mortality from herps, reptiles, amphibians on those existing roads, or do they pretty much stick to the property? I know you showed that range map of movement, but just curious if you're already witnessing any of those events.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes, we have definitely seen mortality, especially along I believe that would be the northwestern corner of the preserve where New Valley Church and Stumptown meet. One of our large vernal pools is right on the corner of that property, and so we have seen quite a bit of mortality with our amphibians kind of going along the border of the property over there.
Great. Yeah, I wondered if there was any, exploration of just even without this road concern, any. I guess you'd have to consider what's on the other side of the road, which I'm unsure of, but any considerations for crossings and connectivity efforts just along the existing roads.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Looks like we got some more thank yous. Um, Trinity, when I was there, this is my final question. When I was there, I think you spoke about is there a section of the sanctuary that is already mitigated land? Did I understand that right?
So there is a portion of the property along the eastern border of the sanctuary where we have an active mitigation project. It is not currently on site yet. They have not actually officially broken ground into the cells, but there is a wetland mitigation project planned for the eastern portion of the sanctuary. Very much um, to be completely impacted if this project proceeds.
That was going to be kind of my question is if, typically in my experience, if it's mitigated land for something else, right? That occurred elsewhere due to impact. It's usually very difficult to impact mitigated land, right? But I guess
Mhm.
if the project hasn't quite started, that changes that a little bit. So that's interesting. Um, I do not see any new questions, but again, I hope you see all the thank yous and just appreciation for this. And I am sincere that I hope you will keep us informed. I think Wild Virginia could help spread any information, try to help get you some support at least. And find ways to connect on this issue. I understand roads have to go somewhere, but we would like to advocate for the best alternative possible and avoid special places like this for sure. So please keep us in touch. And we will follow up everyone with a recording of this presentation and some helpful links and hopefully ways for you to get engaged on this issue or stay engaged if you already are. So we appreciate everybody's time and Trinity, we thank you and look forward to working with you on this and other topics moving forward. You've been a great partner, so thank you.
Great. Thank you guys so much for hosting and thank everybody else for listening on.
All right, thank you everyone.